We right.
It's gotten us this far, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are
Oh, we
live.
live? Ooh,
yes,
hi.
we are. Hello, everyone at Gildify Con. Thanks for tuning in. I am TJ Lombardi, author of the Dying Breed series, as well as Call Sign Bloodbath. Everything is a dumpster fire in my life, but that's fine because today's panel is The Perfect Start. And a panel on beginnings, whether it's Trunken, Link Start, Apocalypse, or any others, how do we grab the reader's attention with the perfect start? So before we get into this panel, let's go around the room and have our amazing authors introduce themselves. And let's start with Stuart.
Hi, I'm Stuart. I'm the author of stories like Rules Free VR MMO Life, Lewd Dungeon Into the Black System Supervillain. I have a new one starting on my Patreon called Reborn as the First Boss, which is basically a biker girl gets isekai'd into a sexy game and as the first boss, and she's decided that she doesn't want to die.
That's fair. All right. Excellent. And Kit.
I'm Kit. I wrote Crafting of Chess, The Rise of Chess. I have a career job, a few other things, intelligence block, and I'm just excited to be here. I'm a bit of a craft fanatic, so we'll talk hooks and character introductions of what I like to do anyway in my spare time.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. And down to right below me, Jack.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Fields. I am an Irish author, and I'm with Legion, very proudly so. And my upcoming novel is my first. It's my debut, and it's called Scarlet Citadel. It's the first in a trilogy, and I'm very excited about it. I'm excited to be here, too.
We can just let him talk the whole time.
Absolutely not, because to our final author on this panel, and who I would say, in my humble opinion, is rated the best hugger in the lit RPG genre from Dragon Con 2023, Miss KT.
Hi, I'm Katie Hanna. I've written too many books. I've written Somnia Online and System Apocalypse Australia and a very, very unknown series called Last Chance. And I actually, my current work, I'm actually super proud of the first line in my current work, which is called Library System Reset, which I only just started posting on Raw Road. So yeah.
Nice.
And great. I love hugs. I find hugs are like energy giving and just fucking awesome. So.
And I think I speak for every single person within the genre. As soon as they meet KT, she instantly is like your sister, and she is just there for you through everything. So.
Oh, I'm just gonna be over here crying. Do you like my mug? Do you like this? Here you go. Like my mug.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. All right. So for those of you who have questions on how to get started and have that really good hook into your writing, go ahead and start asking those questions. But the first question that I have to start out this panel is, when we say grabbing the reader's attention and pulling them in with that perfect start to a book, what is a book that really comes to mind initially for you? And did that book help influence you towards your approach in getting that initial hook?
Well, I like, starting off with a battle or, something big, flashy, attention grabbing, because you can pull back from the battle after, and do some world building. But starting off with some kind of big conflict is like an immediate, okay, things are happening, and that gives you something, to be interested. And then you, like 6 months earlier, and you introduce the people who are just like, in the battle. So you have a reason to want to know about them because they were just doing big, flashy things.
Right. Very nice. Okay, let's Jack, I saw your head kind of tilting like you were agreeing there. So let's drop down to you. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that was very eloquently put. So I think for me, when it comes to big influences or things that jump out at me, as you were saying, things that I think of, I have to. immediately think of the opening to, I don't know if you guys have read Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, but it's got one of the most fabulous openings to any book. It's he was an old man who fished alone in the Gulf Stream, and it had been 84 days now since he had caught a fish. I mean, that tells you just everything. It's wonderful. And I suppose I don't necessarily stick to that because I love a little bit of what Ray Bradbury does at the start of Fahrenheit 451, if you all have read that. The opening line, super tight, "It was a pleasure to burn." And how gripping an opening for a novel. So when I suppose when I write, I like to catch the reader's attention with something perhaps informative about character, setting, place, and style, while also carrying that "it was a pleasure to burn" punch. That's what I like.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So you have intensity of a scene and intensity of combat, but then on the parallel, you also have intensity of emotion of, holy cow, what is this now being led into?
You need something like, on the other places I say that, your cover and your blurb are the bait and the beginning is the hook, and so you need something to actually hook a reader and draw them in.
Nice. Kit, let's go up to you in the corner.
I have a lot of the lines memorized. Neuromancer stands out as one of the few world building / scene setting hooks. The sky is the color of a television turned to a dead channel. Now, obviously, we don't really have that. I'm old. This tells you old because I know what that looks like. The static all gray like that, and the crackling. But
now there's just a circle. What is the circle?
Yeah. Oh, I'm dying because my children will never know that. But the idea of that you're introducing the reader to either the world or the character, and you're trying to combine all the things at once in a tight little line. Mostly it's who are we following, why are we following, and why are we following them? And it's a lot more complicated than you think. Like, why is this interesting? Why should the reader continue on? I have a current project to begin with. Prince is dead and left a beautiful curse, and just the idea that, okay, why? And then that's just trying to get the ask. You're going to give them enough information that they want to know why, but also understand.
Nice. That's awesome. All right, KT, let's go down to you. You're muted. You're muted.
KT, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, that was. See, I'm starting off so well today. It's Sunday, right? Just first of all, the JD, I have already sworn. You've missed it. So you lost that bet. But for me, I don't have any like books that stand out to me. All I try to do is I know that when I read a book, I read very fast, and I have such a TBR backlog that book needs to catch me in like that first, preferably paragraph. If not, maybe I'll give it a chapter. If I can't get into it, then it's not the book for me, and then I just move on to the next one on my TBR list.
It doesn't matter how good the last 90% of the book is.
Oh yeah,
if
it needs to get me.
Hasn't hooked you, the other 90 doesn't get read.
Yeah. There are a couple of exceptions when you have people going, "Oh no, trust me, just get over that hump," and I'll be like, "Oh, fine," and I do that. And actually, out of the few books I've done that with, only one has ever made me go, "Oh, I do not regret reading past this first chapter." So I feel like it needs to be something that hooks you. If not in that first line, in that first chapter, it needs to be a situation that grabs you, keeps a hold of you, and leaves you at the end of that chapter going, "Holy crap, I don't care that it's 1 a.m. in the morning, I have to keep reading." So, and it's super difficult for me. Like, if I can't get that beginning right in my head, I can't write the book. I'm a linear writer. The start is important. I don't write. I follow the 60 seconds. Yes, I do. And I read very fast. So I need to get that beginning. It needs to be done, and it needs to be as perfect as it can get in my author mind, because we all know how that works. it needs to be as good as it can be, and it needs to be right before I can even move on with that book. It doesn't matter how good the idea is. If I don't have the beginning, I can't write the book. So.
Right. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about some of the things that have influenced you guys, as Sharon Schultz asked, what has been your favorite way to introduce a character, either as a writer or a reader? But then my kind of follow-up, as a writer, have you challenged yourself to change, and have you not stick to a continuous pattern? So let's go up to Kit to start this one.
Favorite way. I have a large collection of projects that I've never completed. I'm one of those writers that, like, I'll do lots of little things and get all my practice in, especially like in starting books. And I have favorites that will never see the light of day. So I got one piece that I actually submitted to the Oregon Writing Fellowship. I think all authors should submit to their local fellowships, even if they're like genre things. And I actually begin it with like, because I love video games, obviously. I write this, and I begin with your princess is in another castle, and the quote, "It wasn't quite right, but was how I felt." And I love how I introduced that character because it's first person perspective. It tells me of classic video games and how they are feeling at that time. So I like that kind of personal punch.
Okay, awesome. Let's go down to Jack.
I think it's a wonderful idea to introduce a character in a way that seems to contain them, as if in a kind of narrative jar. So I'll take one from someone else's work first. There's the introduction of a character in Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. Two characters, actually, and these are really terrifying characters. And I think he did a special edition where they start at the beginning of the novel, and it's them burning down a monastery, and it's a terrifying opening, and we really get a sense of them. My favorite way to do it myself, I think in Scarlet Citadel, my favorite character intro is there's a character whose magic item allows her to teleport between reflective surfaces, puddles, windows, panes of glass and things. And her introduction is her slipping out of one of these into a room where some of the participants don't know she's just been spying on their conversation. So as she comes in, hobnail boots first, she arrives, crosses her legs, and comes onto the scene. And there's something quite iconic about that's the way to put it. I love iconic character introductions where you can say, I suddenly understand exactly who this person is with just this one introduction.
Nice. Okay. KT, over to you.
Checking my mute button. Yeah, I don't know. I have my very favorite series of books is called the first book is The Initiate, and that would be my dogs going ape. And it's by Louise Cooper. It's the Time Master trilogy, and you enter the book, and the very first scene is of the main character as a child who doesn't yet know who he is, and it shows the adversity that happens throughout the book in like the first 4 or 5 paragraphs, and it's just this shocking power that comes to him, and this bewilderment, and the whole town turning on him, and it just sets the scene, and it's like gives me chills. I just love it. So I always want to do something that gives you an idea of the situation or the person. Like it depends on my story. So in Rise, which is Past of Last Chance, I the very first 2 paragraphs, I electrocute a character because that's how they come back to life with their powers. So they're like electrocuted. Yay! I like to just, in the first chapter of System Apocalypse Australia, which is kind of a cheat because everybody already knows what System Apocalypse is going to do. But introducing her for who she is and what will later help her with her magical powers that she receives when the system takes place. So, and in my new one, I think it's the world shook with with all the vigor of a wet dog, so that you understand that the shaking is like one of those freaking long-haired wet dogs that's just shaken like a, yeah. Anyway, so you've it just depends on the story that's being told, but you need to set it, and you need to make it understood what situation they're in, what sort of person they are, because they're always going to grow. You hope. We hope. Sometimes they're really stubborn, but yeah. So I took that book that I read as a child, and I have read like probably 30 times since then, and I've always wanted to just create this feeling in my book that just makes you go, wow, I want to keep reading. So.
Nice. Okay, Stuart, up to you.
My two favorite, at least from my books that, introducing a character. First would be Rules Free VR MMO Life, where I started off the first book with a complete ripoff of raiding Icecrown Citadel from World of Warcraft. And so it was the guild, going through, and then the celebration after, and they say, and now we're going to go to we beat this game, we're going to go to the new game, and that's how we're moving into the new story. And, that was just a lot, it was Lich, follow Lich King with the numbers filed off, and it was a lot of fun to write. The other one that I did that I really liked was in my book, not Lit RPG, but my book, Memoirs of a Supervillain, where the first prologue was basically this introduction to his memoir, like, so you want to be a supervillain. And it just went down his description of the different kinds of supervillains. Like, you had the psychos, and you had the, mercenaries, and you had the people who were the zealot for a cause, and he was an adventurer, went on like that. So that was a lot of fun in different ways. One was a bunch of action, and the other was from his point of view, what villainy is like.
Nice. Okay. When we say, having that great start to a book and really trying to hook a reader, as a writer, how far do you really carry that? Do you feel like there's a certain amount that is the perfect amount to really carry and start that act one and then go into the rest of the foundation of the world? Where do you find that balance in that initial start?
I'm a pantser. I write everything as it comes to me. So I'm literally start at the beginning and then continue on until I get to the end. So everything.
But you have an end point, right? An end point, like that, approximately that will be the end.
Because I do serial novellas, the end point is basically whenever I decide to end things. So it's more like TV instead of film. Whereas novels are more like, a film, and you might have a film trilogy, but they're all, contained, self-contained arcs. Mine is more like MASH, this TV series, where it's like it keeps on going until they run out of things to do.
Nice. Kit, what about you?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. When you're starting out in that great initial impact of your character, your scene, how far do you really carry that? Do you feel like there's a specific amount of building into the foundation of Act One for your story?
It's when you're starting, you kind of have that inciting incident, be it the plan that's in the character's mind, or it's like the fact that for me the inciting incident, not necessarily the big event that's happening, but it's the intersection of the character with the event. So because that's how what I'm introducing the character around, that's going to carry through ideally for that whole arc of the book, even if it's not 100% clear to the reader, sometimes like My sequel, The Crafting of Chess, Divided of Chess, I consider the end a little bit mushy, but the arc was kind of the being first to go out and make friends at school and kind of like showing the evolution of that. And you want that beginning to carry through on some level, so it feels more complete when you get to that end.
Nice, excellent. Jack, let's go down to you.
So imagine you're at a seafood restaurant and you've just ordered. You look at the menu and you're examining the different things, and you go, "Oh, I'm in the mood for salmon. Oh, there's a nice lemon sauce. Fantastic. Waiter, I will have some salmon." And they say, "Of course, monsieur, I will get you," because of course the waiter is French, and he melts away. And then you're really excited about the fact that you've ordered salmon. And then a moment or two passes, and he comes back with a silver platter, and there's a fucking basking shark on the platter, and he slams the basking shark down, and he says, "What do you order, monsieur?" And he melts away before you can protest. The trick to opening with a character or setting or a particular style is you're making a promise with the start of your novel, with the first line, the first page, perhaps not as drastic as the first word, but maybe close. You're making a promise. So you're trying to fulfill that promise throughout the novel. And characters, yeah, you actually do start with a promise with your characters in terms of advancement as well. Maybe you see them like Indiana Jones at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. This character is an adventurer who fails at the beginning, and they are an adventurer who will succeed later. So that works effectively, and that's certainly a philosophy that I've tried to bring into Scarlet Citadel. And thank you, Rachel.
Very nice. KT, over to you.
Yes. So basically, I feel like your beginning, no matter what you're writing, what genre you're writing, it needs to set the tone and set the, like you said, Jack, expectations, and everybody else I think said that too, for the rest of the book. You can't like have 3 or 4 chapters going along and suddenly change the trajectory of where your story is headed. So yeah, it's very important, especially in that first chapter, to make sure your tone and your direction are all included. And yeah, I don't really think there's anything else to say.
Okay, well, we'll stay with you for my next question here.
Ooh.
So in Lit RPG, we don't just have our main characters that we want our readers to really rally around or get connected with, but we also have these incorporations of game mechanics and the system per se. So how do you feel you can hit the right amount where here's the character that I want you to rally behind, and then here's your understanding of the system, and it's not just an information dump?
Okay, so I feel like it's with writing any fiction, you need to get a balance. When I first started writing in the genre many years ago, I had discovered it. I mean, I'm an EverQuest player. I met my husband in EverQuest 2 and moved to America from Australia. Kansas, don't even. It's nicer than you think. And I'm a huge gamer. And Vanguard, if you're old enough to understand what I say when I say Vanguard. So I had this amazing idea. I was like, oh my gosh. And virtual reality was like the thing back then. And so I had this idea, and I kid you not, it took me, I read like 12 books in like 9 days, and I went, holy crap, I've got an idea, and I started writing. Because for me, it was like, I'd come home, I could write a book about gaming. Holy crap. Like, that's just fucking amazing. And, but you do have to balance it. Now, you need to give enough explanation that if somebody who isn't an avid gamer picks your book up, they're going to understand your system. But you can't give too much explanation, because most of your readers are already going to understand what a system is. So you have to like really play this balance game. And to be honest, in the first book of Somnia, I might have gone a little bit overboard with the explanations of how a system worked. But you know, I was getting into a groove. I hadn't written in this genre before. I just wrote post-apocalyptic science fiction. So I believe that you have to strike that balance when you find it, and you just have to make sure that you're not overstatting people, over-explaining things, because your readers are a lot cleverer than you give them credit for. Just imagine if you, like, I always try to put myself in the shoes of the person reading my book, just like of your characters, so that you can, you understand how you would feel if somebody was over explaining something to you. So I think it's easy to do if you love gaming. It would be difficult to do if you weren't really a gamer and you were trying to write lit RPG. So yeah,
that's great. Stuart, let's go up to you.
For me, it depends on whether it's a system that I'm creating or a system that I am stealing. Because I've done books with, a generic throw it together kind of system, and where I just make stuff up as I go. And then I've done books where I actually use Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 or Mutants and Mastermind 2nd or Hero System 5th edition, which are all crunchy, kind of crunchy systems. So I actually have like dice rolls and stuff in those. And so you need to introduce the concepts a bit more in depth for those, just because if you can have a gamer who isn't a Champions game, a Hero System gamer, and they're going to maybe understand a few things, but there's a lot to the system. So you have to explain more and you have to go into some details more. But for my just generic making stuff up, systems, usually because it's somebody getting thrown into the system, then I can explain it as they come into, as they're exposed to it. So it's like, oh, this new blue box showed up and here's what's this GP? Oh, gold, and here's how the currency works. So that kind of thing.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, Kit, let's go over to you.
Yeah, I find that I agree that there's the method in which you are taking the outsider and putting them in the story, in which you are letting the reader learn with the protagonist. First, it's always fun to take that one and to flip expectations, and that the protagonist's assumptions end up being terribly wrong and causing lots of problems. But the other way is you're introducing characters in an existing system where either they're long-term players or they live in that universe. And I find how you get the balance of giving the information on the system generally to be is, what are the problems? Directly, like the character has goal A and they need to use their magic or system or the problem, and that's how you introduce it. The character themselves are having issues with the magic system or technology, and because they are working it out and having that conflict, that is kind of how you're releasing it to the reader. And I often like having like debates, like there's one group that thinks one thing and another group that thinks another thing, and the reader doesn't know what's quite right, but they're still experiencing that idea with the protagonist. And I find that's how I like the information into my books.
Nice. Okay, and down to Jack in the corner.
Well, look, I absolutely adore what KT, Kit, and Stuart have said. I think that they've basically struck the anvil perfectly with what they said, in that I think the watchword is balance. If you're looking through the story through the lens of a particular character's perspective, how much they know about the system is key, because you're writing implicitly and explicitly. So a character who knows a lot about a system isn't going to go, aha, and this is how you use strength. Exactly. They're going to say, oh yeah, okay, perfect. I switch between my different motions and I attack and I take them down. It's how the character thinks about the system. So when I write using a system itself, I'm trying to think about how the person approaches it and what balance should be struck for the reader. My protagonist Hughes in Scarlet Citadel uses performance. So he's thinking a little bit about, in order to sort of influence the minds of those around him magically. So for him, it's the case of scene setting. Is everything cascaded with rain, and is everyone kind of transformed into sort of hunched gargoyles in the rain? He needs to think about how to incorporate that into what he says. but he's not going to necessarily think about it in terms of number crunching. What he's thinking about is, environment, approachability, and again, as my fellow panelists have so articulately put it, it's about a balance. Don't overwhelm the reader if you don't have to. If you need exposition, use it, but sparingly.
Right. And so I think this is a great lead into JD's question that he had earlier. Do you find the action and the impetus of kinetic movement to be one of the best ways to jump in? Or is it a go-to shift to begin your stories and just a variable based upon whatever story you want to write at the moment? Jack, or Stuart, actually, I saw you. So.
All right. Like you said, for most of my stuff, having some action at the start doesn't have to be like a big giant battle or, but just something actively going, something in motion is a good way to draw people in at the start. If you're not going to do that, you have to have some emotional motion or some, something that is like, hey, so you want to be a supervillain. Here's what the different kinds of villains are. Something that draws people in and isn't just, and we're starting the story. So you have to have something that pulls them in, and whether it's action or emotion or just it's hardly a coincidence that in no language there is the phrase "pretty as an airport," which is the start of Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul, which sets the tone for the entire book. But you need something to draw people in, and then you can move to the world building and everything.
Hold on, I got to start my new line. It was a wonderful airport, an airport all airports wanted to be.
I love how you spoke about that, Stuart. The idea of emotional motion. That's a great phrase. And I think, yes, it speaks to the fact that not all action is a Michael Bay kaboom. Sometimes the action
Many
is...
times.
Oh, yeah.
Many times you don't need Michael Bay kaboom.
Yeah. So sometimes it's actually enough action just to give us a sense of someone is really at a point of disintegration in their lives. What's the Dodie Smith opening to I Capture the Castle? The first line is, I write this sitting in the kitchen sink. That's like the amount of turmoil that speaks to. I love that phrase, emotional motion. That's a great way to start a novel.
I want to know how big the kitchen sink is. Because that's a big kitchen sink.
Yes, emotional motion more than motion, as JD put it, kind of that impetus. Emotional motion makes you ask more questions.
And it's like, why are they in the kitchen sink? How did they get into the kitchen sink?
Is it going to hold their weight? Because we built our house. We had ours undermounted.
What brought us here?
Yeah. I was like, why hasn't it fallen out?
Yes, well, sorry, yeah, those practical questions, but also, like Stuart was saying, what brought us here, and then maybe that emotional motion of what will get us out of the kitchen sink too. I mean, it's so good.
Are they stuck? Are they having leg cramps? Like, what's going on? Kit, up to you. What do you think?
I mean, I agree with a lot of those things. I like to think of it kind of as like potential energy. Let's give them either a situation, say meeting a relative they don't want to see, or something else, that the character can visualize. Oh, I see how this can go wrong. How will this go wrong? So you have this potential energy in the introduction to the reader. It's not about the physical action. It's obviously really difficult to show fighting and the scenes that you show in like movies and anime and all that in writing. So the best you can do is kind of the internal state, so you have the energy there, the setup, like how will this go wrong? So I think of it as a version of ball of potential energy that you're saying, look, there are about a dozen ways it's going to go wrong. Don't you want to see everything? And that's kind of how I think about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's actually a great lead into one of Kyle Wilkinson's questions. And Kit will have you start with this one, but he said, is it required to have a problem come up at the beginning of a book to make it a good book?
Yes and no, because there's always exceptions. When you write, and when we talk about all of these writing craft things, these are the principles for ourselves and work in our writing, and it is possible to start book in a way in which you do not have the problem, you do not have the conflict, yet you want that people want to see what's going to happen. And I like to call those type of things like advanced Redding. Like when somebody goes on to Reddit, I give Reddit advice sometimes, and they're like, I want my character to start with amnesia or wake up from a dream, all of those cliches that, I'm like, okay, you can make this work, but it's going to be extra difficult, because you're not introducing the character, they're not in a solid state, you don't know what the problem's going on. So I try to give like a little example, like the main character is waking up in with amnesia in the middle of a battle in the ocean, and there's a weapon lying under the water, and the main character grabs it when somebody else is reaching for it and kills the person. They don't know who they are, but they know they're the type of person to kill someone.
And it's
So
all
kind of like
contained within
you
a
can
kitchen sink.
do these things. It's just not the easiest.
Sure. Absolutely. Stuart, let's go over to you.
I think, again, yes and no. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. Examples of starting with a problem is like Saving Private Ryan. You start on the beach at Normandy. There are problems aplenty there. A different example where you don't start with not really any real problem is the start of The Hobbit, where Bilbo is just sitting on his, front porch, smoking, chatting with the wizard, and gets flustered because of the wizard making weird comments. So he invites him to tea, and that just starts the adventure. And so either way, one is there's a problem and you need to solve this problem real fast. The other is, it's introducing a people and a tone and moving along. So you have to have something going. It doesn't need to be a problem. It just needs to be something happening. You
Gotcha.
don't start, with reading the phone book. You start with, okay, we're going to go out and have a fun time at the club tonight. That can be a great start to a thing. And then you wake up the next morning in chapter 2 and there's a dead body next to you. And then we start the show.
Right. Okay, let's go down to KT in the corner.
What was the question again?
Do you feel like you have to have a problem at the start of your book to make it a good book?
Maybe not a problem, but an instigation of some sort. Like there needs to be something to, get interest. Even having a hobbit sitting on the porch listening to a wizard talk, like that's, wow, what exactly is a hobbit? And why is there a wizard here? And what sort of magic can this wizard do? Like that's going to start you thinking. And also like, hey, somebody almost getting run over as they cross the road to go to a corner shop. Do you have corner shops in America? I don't know.
If it is, it's a Starbucks.
Yeah, right.
Or gas station.
Why were they so preoccupied that they almost got hit by a car? Like there's just there's ways you can do it without necessarily like a super. Yeah, I lost the question again. Seriously, Katie. But it needs to be something that that can go on. It needs to not be boring, not mundane, because nobody wants to pick up a mundane book. Nobody's going to just read about somebody's going about their day doing literally nothing that's exciting. So I think there has to be a certain balance there, right, where you need to make sure that whatever you're writing elicits questions like kitchen sinks do. So you need to keep it going.
Right. Jack, anything to add?
Yes, I think that even in the example of the Hobbit there is a secret problem that even the protagonist or your hero or heroine isn't necessarily aware of. I think for Bilbo or his descendant Frodo later in those novels is there's some secret like song right at the core of any character that just needs to be sung. There's actually the line of Belladonna Took in the case of Lord of the Rings. Those hobbits need adventure. They lust after it, even if they can convince themselves at the outset that it's the opposite of what they want. And there's that great sense of what Kit was talking about earlier, the potential energy, the push and pull. Do you need to necessarily start out with a problem? I think it can be a handy shorthand. So when it comes to like cozy fantasy, which is on the rise as a kind of an aftershock of cozy crime, beginning with aha, and then there was a murder can be a really useful way in to the story for the reader, certainly. Yeah, that's my thought on it.
Okay, perfect. I think for this next, we can actually get two questions knocked out at once, because one is from Sharon Schultz, who says, what is your opinion on a character's starting gear? Should they start out naked and build up, or get a basic set, or start with one good item? But then Kyle Wilkinson also asked, is using a unique weapon as an MC enough to keep you interested in a book, and can that be the hook that keeps the series going? So let's start with KT on this one.
Me. Okay. I think it depends on your unique weapon. Is it like it is in the New World, which is like the only good part of that game, where your weapons are actually where your abilities come from? Like, is that the sort of weapon? Like, I can't really answer that unless I know what you mean by unique weapon. But if you have a unique weapon that you can build a story around, then yes, because that's your that's the crux of your story. As far as Sharon's question goes with starter gear, I don't know. I think it depends on your type of system and the type of environment they're in. Some of them may still just be wearing normal clothes, and that just may be how your system works. And they may get other stats instead that, like, defensive stats that make shielding go over their clothes or whatever. So it really depends on your world, how you're establishing your system, and what events or what conditions need to be fulfilled for that system to upgrade things. So that's it's a very subjective question. Like it
Right.
depends on your story, your world building, and your end goal. So
Yep, absolutely. Stuart, let's go up to you.
So I usually start my characters off with, not nothing, but basic stuff. But my characters are always overpowered in some way. Usually through class abilities, or they just have, here's 100 extra stat points that other people don't have for reasons, because I like overpowered protagonists. It's power fantasy, so I just do that. But a signature weapon, some kind of unique signature weapon is not enough to carry the story unless it's this is Frostmourne, or from World of Warcraft, where it is that high level of, this is the weapon that is the doom of the world. Unless it's something like that, it can contribute. It can be a signature part of the character's look, but the weapon cannot carry the story unless it is, I am the only person around that has a lightsaber. I am the only person that has Frostmourne. Unless it's something really out there, it can't carry the story.
Right. Okay.
it could be a sentient sword.
Yeah, it can
It
be.
Don't hold me like that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Kit, over to you.
I mean, like, anything is possible. Everybody either loves or hates Frank the Axe and his desire to punch the moon. You know, I mean, is that really a weapon, or is that its own character that is actually the protagonist of that book? Um, People can debate that, but you do see it much more like anime. I was reincarnated as a sword or transported to another world, but I have my smartphone or whatever thing they're using as a key. Um, I think it does have limited legs that you could do a specific item, and make that key. I mean, if we go back to Lord of the Rings, you have the One Ring, is a specific item that is sets everything in motion. So it is possible to have a specific item, a unique thing, and have it carry it, but it can't be the only thing. I mean, you can't have a main character that is wet paperback. You have to have these fully developed characters that are interesting, and they have these things. Nothing carries itself. You could have character that's really interesting and everything else be bland, and then the book's not going to carry itself. And this is all a collection of things that are added. As for the beginning year, we write progression books, so it's always good to get like upgrades. We all kind of like that. Um, it can become an issue when there's just too many of them, the big bag of loot filled with impossible number of items, and you kind of sometimes it annoys the reader to get some special item and it just goes into the bag of loot and then gets completely forgot about. So there's a balance, and it just it's a whole. Everything's a whole.
Nice.
I'm holding all those health potions for when I really need them, honestly.
Yeah, but that's how you
And
play
one,
a
and
game.
two, and
Like
three.
that's just how you play the game.
Anyway,
I'm gonna need that scrap of bat fur at some stage. I can't sell it.
I was saying gaming is the one time where it's okay to just be a hoarder.
Yes,
Like, just give me all
just
the
in
items.
case.
Yep.
Jack, any thoughts on these two questions?
Well, weapons don't kill characters. Writers kill characters. It is.
A lot.
Thank you,
Frequently.
philosopher Jack.
But it's I love it a lot with slightly crazy eyes. I think it's very useful to have a Divinity Original Sin 2. That's great, Rachel. Yes, for a particular weapon to hold a big place in a story is completely fine. For it to be the crux of the story, then you're into sort of MacGuffin territory, the sort of Shannara, the One Ring, as Kit was saying. But so it can be a very useful tool in your toolbox as an author to have a particular thing that someone's hunting after, questing after, or in the case of some novels, including mine, where the weapon and the weapon isn't sentient, but it's almost a kind of representation of the character, or a sort of a kind of a bonding device, where they can express one another through one another, a kind of reciprocity. I find that's a very interesting idea. But
like how in the Fable games, you change.
I love those games.
A great example.
How you're acting, so your weapon and gear change with you.
Yeah.
Yes, if you're doing an evil playthrough of I used to love Fable 2 as a kid.
That's a really freaking great game.
So good.
As a kid, oh my god, I feel so old.
No, but it was a fabulous
dragging your wife and kids to the temple to sacrifice them again and again and again.
Yes, well, some player experiences may differ. But and then I suppose speaking to the other portion of the question, when it comes to starting your characters out, I think the power fantasy is incredibly valid. Oh my god, shonen anime would not exist if people didn't want to be Goku. If people didn't adore that idea of being, the love of fighting is what takes people up and up and up. And they already started pretty high. I mean, that's fabulous. And there's nothing wrong with that. For me, I will say when I write, I love rags to riches. I love those storylines that take characters right at their nadir, their fucking lowest point, and they see the mountain and they know that the only way up it is rung by rung, which will make getting to the top of the mountain for them incredibly satisfying. So that's how I see the progress in my stories taking shape through gear and through level up and powers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And there's room for both in the genre.
Yes.
So,
Well,
because
I know
there are definitely room for the start at the bottom and work your way up, and then there's also room for the hi, I'm Goku and I'm gonna wreck your ass, and
I'm
then
going to get even stronger.
just to keep curb stomping everyone who shows up.
Right. I know I've talked about it before. Michael Head's latest book, Wandering Warrior Judges, you have a character that starts out at level 50. They're already maxed out. And so it really depends if you're a writer, where do you want to write? Where do you want
Where's
to
the story start?
character?
Yeah.
Exactly. So you have room to play on both ends of that introduction. Okay, so Rachel Nee Kirk. Question: how much should your opening tie into your ending? Or does it matter?
Yes.
It matters to some extent, just because the beginning needs to lead to the end.
Yeah.
But unless you are actually planning it out ahead of time, like how Watchmen was all planned out ahead of time, and then they made it work from the beginning of the comic to the end. You try to bring it to a satisfactory end. You can't really plan the symmetry unless you are actually planning, which for some of us is something we don't do.
I was about to say, like,
when you
hey,
try
so
to plan it,
sure, it's in the same book. It can happen.
or when you try to plan it and then your characters are like, fuck no. And they're like, so we should do this and this and this and this.
Yeah, listen to your characters when they say, screw this, we're doing something else. Because that's where the story really wants to go.
Yeah. Mine do that so much, I gave up setting.
I think you need to separate this into like serial writing versus novel writing in some ways, because those are two different things, different approaches in how you're I mean, there are similarities and you can tie them about. But
Somnia was supposed to be 4 books long, and we all know it's not. So
but there's also that promise that you're giving the reader, So I do think that the beginning should tie in to the end, either the end of an arc or the end of the series. Let's go to Tai Wong's System Apocalypse, where he has the beginning and the main character gets. I mean, I suppose I shouldn't spoil anything, for people who want to read it. But I mean, what?
He writes in 3-book arcs, so an arc is always an overwhelming 12-book arc. So he
still tied the first book to the very last book. There's still that tie, because and you were the writer, you were in complete control, so you can easily take some little fact from the very beginning and go, I'm going to use this, and I've done enough threads throughout the book, and I'm going to use that as my ending, and I just did not know it when I first wrote the book.
Yes.
And the reader doesn't need to know you didn't know it,
and you
can't compliment you.
Yes. That was the plan all along.
I knew it all along. Yes, exactly. And
that's what was supposed to happen. Yes.
That's what was supposed to happen.
People in my Patreon sometimes are like, I can't believe you planned this out so long ago. I'm like, yes, planned. I planned.
When you have that bullet list point of stuff that you need to make sure comes back, and you're like, okay, I think I need to bring this back now. It's been like 30 chapters.
That's far more planning than I do.
Right.
That's the advantage of plot, right? Plot is simply cause and effect action. As long as the cause and effect action is in a line and it makes sense, it always will seem like it is planned out, even if it is not.
And the advantage of pantsing is there's no such thing as a plot hole. There are only plot points that have not yet been addressed.
Well, I actually find that people who do the structured writing have more plot holes than pantsers, because pantsers have to continue with that cause and effect action, even when they do time jumps.
Especially
and that when you're designing something preset, you'll sometimes include things that get missed in the bigger picture when you are done.
Especially if you're pantsing in order, writing in order as you're, making it up as you go along, as opposed to people who they have it planned out and this is how they want to do, and then they, something comes up and oh wait, how do I get from here to there?
Exactly.
And or especially the people who write out of order. I don't know how people
I can't do that. My brain just like flatlines. It just
no, can't do that.
Yeah, I will admit, as someone who does write both planning and sometimes out of order. Sorry, gang, bit of blasphemy here. I first of all, I tremendously agree with the idea that there needs to be a certain amount of organicness with your characters. If they're yanking in a certain way, you have to follow that. And actually, anytime I've written a book or written a story, even one that's short, the ending is drastically different. Even when you plan, you still find your ending. Let's say like the box is still like the gift box is in the right shape, but what's inside is like, oh, okay, that's another basking shark. So yeah, in this case, I think that where was the original point of the line of questions?
I have no idea. I lost it, and I think we're like running out of time.
We are. Yeah. I was about to say, just Jack being a man of such philosophy is now telling us he's of such chaos.
I know, right? I thought it was like all organized, and now he's like chaos incarnate.
Oh, you have to hybrid. You have to be, and sometimes you have to be a person who builds a building, and sometimes you have to say, actually, let's just fill this building with bathrooms. But yes, TJ, do you want to bring us out?
Well, I think we have 2 questions we can answer as a good closing segue, and then we'll have you guys go around the room. The first one is from Nick Boslow, who's Ni Mika. Would you ever start a book with a system explanation? And then Kyle Wilkinson was, do you prefer to introduce your villain right at the start of the book, or do you enjoy the suspense of introducing them later?
Oh, can I jump in here with the villain one?
Sure.
Yeah.
Love the idea of starting with your villains as one of the central things. In Scarlet Citadel, the basking shark. The 2 of my favorite characters to write in this story are the villains. They are the main villains we feature. Miss Gleam and Mr. Clint are the most like awful individuals that I have ever penned, and I loved writing them from word go. And I think it can be a great source of, it can be a great catalyst, the dynamite that really sparks your story off to say, here are the villains. Let's see how the heroes can work around them. Good luck.
All right.
I don't start off with a system explanation just because, that's world building and you want to help people before you get into world building.
Yeah.
I do start off with villains a lot because I write villains as protagonists. So that's introducing the main character, is introducing the villain. And since I do serials, my heroes are usually the road bump of the week.
Sorry, that was a really loud laugh.
Sorry, KT, go ahead.
I tend to like to introduce my villains like in little trails, like little breadcrumbs. And as for system explanation, I'm a big what's the opposite of proponent? Like opponent. I don't like starting with any info dump whatsoever. I like to pepper my information through as much as possible with as few info dumps anywhere in the book.
Nice. Okay, Kit, up to you.
I'd say you could do the system, but it's extra difficult. But we also have a whole subgenre of dungeon crawl books, in which it seems like that's often almost how a lot of those begin. So, I mean, if that's what you want to write, I almost want to recommend that you go with something where the audience expectation lies that way. As for the villains, depends on what the inciting incident. If the villains are the inciting incident in the core of the book, they go in sooner. All of the times I just have nasty side characters who are kind of my villains. They're the road bumps and not primary thing. So I make fun of them. So I think that just depends on what you are doing and what your goal is.
Nice. Excellent. I think that was a great way to close us out. So quickly for everyone, if you can go around the room, tell us what you're most working on and where's the best place for people to find your work. let's go ahead and start with Stuart.
All right, I'm currently working on like 5 projects. My newest one is Reborn as the First Boss, where the main character is a biker chick that gets reincarnated as the first boss of a sexy game, and she wants to survive. You can find me on Patreon. My name there is Mirikon, Mirikon. I'm also, all my stuff is on Amazon. Most of it is in Kindle Unlimited, unless it's on Royal Road.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, Kit.
All my stuff's on Amazon. I am working on the last book of the chess series, and I have a Made Necromancer book that is. I'm building content. I have 1 book done, building content for the 2nd book. Don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I still need to do some planning and talking with people. That's the Prince one that I mentioned earlier. That I'm hoping at some point will be out next year. And that's what I got working on and have.
Awesome. KT.
Oh, I am on Amazon with multiple series, and I'm currently posting my newest one on Royal Road. And otherwise, I do have a Patreon that has up to 10 chapters in advance of my library system reset overdue, because who doesn't love a magical library? Yeah, so ta-da!
Awesome. And Jack, close us out.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure to talk with all of you. And yes, I'm Jack Fields. My upcoming debut fantasy lit RPG novel is called Scarlet Citadel. I'm being published with Legion. Thank you, Geneva. And I'm tremendously excited to see what people think. Keep an eye on the horizon for it. But yeah, thank you for running, TJ.
Absolutely. Hey,
Yeah,
thanks
thank
everyone
you,
for tuning
TJ.
in. The next takeover is the one and only Aileron Kong with his narrator, Luke Daniels. So guys, just stay here and jump right on over to that link when it pops up. Thanks, everyone.
See
Bye.
y'all.